The marketplace on Sector Station Orcs hummed with the commerce of 1,000 worlds. Vendors from across the Galactic Coalition hawked their wares beneath holographic canopies that shifted through every color imaginable. The air itself was a cocktail of atmospheric preferences, nitrogen-rich pockets for the Valthene, sulfur traces for the Korgoth, and standard oxygen zones for the dozens of species who breathed as humans did. Ilara Nox moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her worn jacket marking her as what she was, a salvager, one of the countless humans who made their living picking through the debris fields left by forgotten wars. She'd come to Orcs for supplies, nothing more. She certainly hadn't expected to witness history. The first sign of trouble was the silence. It spread like a shock wave through the market, conversations dying mid-sentence, transactions abandoned, the usual cacophony of interstellar trade simply stopping. Ilara turned toward the disturbance and felt her breath catch. They moved through the parting crowd like legends made flesh, dragons, not the mythical creatures from Earth's old stories, but the Drakthar, an ancient species whose very name caused diplomatic incidents. The adult stood nearly 12 feet tall, even on all fours, scales like polished obsidian reflecting the station's lights in rainbow patterns, massive wings, folded tight against its serpentine body, still brushed against stalls on either side of the walkway. But it was the juvenile that drew Ilara's attention. Smaller, perhaps the size of a large dog, with scales that hadn't yet hardened to their adult opacity. It limped, favoring its left foreleg, and made small sounds of distress that its parent answered with low, rumbling growls. The crowd didn't just make room. They fled. Ilara understood why. 3 cycles ago, a trade dispute with the Drakthar had ended with an entire mining colony reduced to slag. The Galactic Coalition had paid reparations that bankrupted 2 systems. The dragons had paid nothing. Their philosophy was simple: cross them, and civilizations burned. Station security appeared, their weapons drawn but held low. Not pointed at the dragons, no one was that suicidal but ready. The lead officer, a Valthene with mottled blue skin, raised his voice. Translator. Honored Drakthar, this station has medical facilities. We can summon. The adult dragon's head snapped toward him, eyes like molten gold fixing on the officer with such intensity that he actually stumbled backward. The message was clear. Approach, at your peril. Right, the officer muttered. We'll just maintain perimeter security. Ilara watched as the dragons made their way toward what looked like a service corridor. The juvenile's distress calls were getting worse. Its leg was badly damaged. Ilara could see the unnatural angle now. Probably broken. Every step brought a small cry that twisted something in her chest. Around her, the other species kept their distance. The crowd had reformed, but at a radius of at least 30 meters. Ilara saw representatives from a dozen civilizations, many of them with renowned medical capabilities. The Kashari could regenerate limbs. The Thule had technology that could knit bone in minutes. None of them moved. Fear, she realized. Not just caution or diplomatic restraint, but pure, primal fear. They would let a child suffer rather than risk the wrath of its parent. Ilara had never been particularly good at restraint. She pushed through the inner ring of the crowd, ignoring the gasps and the hand that grabbed at her sleeve. She shrugged it off. Her boots echoed on the deck plating as she stepped into the empty space surrounding the dragons. Hey, she called out. I can help. The adult dragon wheeled with impossible speed for something so large. Those golden eyes locked onto her. And Ilara felt the weight of an intelligence older than her entire species. She also felt the heat, literal heat, radiating from the creature in waves. For a moment, she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. Then the dragon spoke, its voice a resonant bass that she felt in her bones. The station's translator system struggled with the ancient language before rendering it in standard. You are prey. Fragile. Weak. Yeah, Ilara agreed, taking another step forward. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her hands visible and open. I'm all of those things. But I'm also someone who knows how to set a broken bone, and your kid is hurting. The juvenile made another sound, and the adult's attention flickered to it for just an instant. When those eyes returned to Ilara, something had shifted in them. Why? It was perhaps the simplest question in any language, and the most complex. Why would she risk herself for a species that could incinerate her with a thought? Why would she approach when everyone else with better abilities held back? Alara thought of Earth, of humanity's long climb from prey species to starfarers. She thought of every story she'd heard about humans doing stupid, reckless, inexplicable things because someone needed help. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was arrogance. Maybe it was just that humans had spent so long being the underdog that they'd never learned proper fear of their betters. Because it's a kid, she said simply. And it's scared, and in pain. And I can do something about that. The silence stretched. Behind her, Alara could hear the whispers of the crowd, shocked murmurs in a dozen languages. She could feel their eyes on her back, waiting to see if she'd become the first human-shaped scorch mark on Auriac Station. Then the adult dragon did something unprecedented. It lowered its massive head and stepped aside. Approach then, it rumbled. If you can ease my hatchling's pain, the Drakthar will remember. But know this, fragile one. If you cause further harm, your species will remember too. Alara's mouth was dry, but she nodded and moved toward the juvenile. As she knelt beside it, murmuring soft reassurances, she heard the crowd's reaction, a collective gasp that rippled through the station. The dragon, whom she would later learn was called Finn, watched her with those ancient eyes as she examined the broken leg. The juvenile, barely more than a hatchling, really whimpered, but held still under her gentle hands. Okay, little one, Alara whispered. This is going to hurt, but then it'll be better. I promise. Thanks for watching. The Prinzant and you. Thanks for watching. I promise the pendant into the belders. She worked quickly, using supplies from her salvager's kit to create a splint. Her hands, calloused from years of working with scrap metal and broken machinery, moved with surprising gentleness. The hatchling cried out once when she set the bone, and Alara felt the temperature around her spike. Fine's protective instinct flaring, but she kept working, kept murmuring reassurance. When she finished, she sat back on her heels. That should hold until you can get proper medical attention. The Kashari ward is 2 levels up. They'll be able to— No, Finn interrupted. You have done what they would not. That is sufficient. The adult dragon moved closer, and Alara fought every instinct that screamed at her to run. Instead, she held her ground, as Finn lowered that massive head, until they were eye to eye. What is your name? Brave fool? Alara Nox. Alara Nox, Finn repeated, as if tasting the syllables. The Drakthar do not forget kindness any more than we forget insult. You have made an ally today, and perhaps your species has as well. As Alara walked back through the crowd, still stunned into silence, she caught sight of her reflection in a vendor's mirror. She looked the same as always. Average height, unremarkable features, the kind of person who blended into any crowd. But as the whispers started, as the story began to spread through the station and then out to the wider galaxy, she realized that sometimes being human meant doing the thing everyone else thought was impossible. Not because humans were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because sometimes, when everyone else stepped back, a human would step forward.